What's up YouTube, Demi here with a build guide for Flying Purple People, my Lacerate Slayer that can also be used with any other two-handed melee skill, but right now it's focused on Starforge, so it's pure physical chaos with Lacerate. We'll go through a quick T15 map so you guys can see what it looks like in mapping and endgame, and we'll talk about the build as we go. So I designed this character a couple weeks back to just be like a really fast leech character. And since then, we've gotten a lot of buffs, we've gotten a lot of nerfs. Slayer got touched a little bit this league and reduced with its maximum life leech rate, but then they gave us Vol Pact. So this version that you're seeing right now is the same as the 3.0 version without, like, this is just the same exact tree as it was before without Vol Pact, and it's still quite a lot of leech. Let me see if I can just stand here and let these guys hit me. You see that leech? It's not as fast as it was because they removed Slayer leech 10%. So like, I think the new tree that I'll show you guys in a second is a little bit better when it comes to survivability at endgame. The only thing you lose is your life regen, which kind of sucks for people that like doing Uber Lab, since you won't have your passive life regen. You have to actually hit something to leech. But yeah, this is at endgame with just a Starforge, which should be fairly cheap now. I tend to stack a ton of attack speed so that my leap slam feels really good, and my main attack doesn't feel like I'm getting stuck in the multi-strike animation. Yeah, you can start with this character in any league. It scales very well with nothing. You can like level up with just generic like two-handed unique swords up until you get like a Kondo's Pride at endgame, which would be about 400 DPS weapon. It costs like a chaos. And then once you get into the ability to afford a Starforge, which will probably be a couple X, maybe, that weapon will carry you through the rest of the entire game. I've had players do the Shaper and whatnot with a Kondo's Pride though. Like, you can beat the game with a Kondo's Pride more or less. You just have to play a little bit safer. So there's your map clear. We'll go ahead and talk about the skill tree. So, as I said, this is the 3.1 skill tree, which you are a Slayer. You go up for Endless Hunger. For your Overkill, leech his life. This means that like after you're done hitting something, you're leeching for for whatever your leech per second is for 30 seconds. The life leech effects are not rooted full life. And then Brutal Fervor gives you cannot be stunned and you're immune to bleed while leeching, and 100% increased life leech per second, which is great. On this side, you get Onslaught for 20 seconds whenever you kill a rare unique, so that's basically up 100% of the time while mapping. 20% Cull, which is 25% more damage right there. And then you get reduced reflective physical damage taken, which doesn't really matter anymore since Reflect was removed, but you get 20% more damage if you killed recently, and 50% AoE if you killed recently. So that's also up basically the entire map until you get to the boss. As for the skill tree, it's pretty simple. It's mostly just like all the two-handed nodes, all the leech nodes, all the sword nodes, all the life nodes you can get. So I just go this way. I'll just like do the path as if you were leveling. You just come through all these nodes, grab some two-handed damage nodes, and then you go grab sword nodes. And you should start picking up everything else. I go Blood Magic fairly early on. The reason I go Blood Magic is because of how much life it gives. These are 15, 10, and 10 points right there. Yes, I know I'll lose that, that's fine. So that's 800 life for 4 points for me, which is quite a lot. Your average node on the tree is 5% life. Like, these are pretty normal life nodes. So these are just massive. And because we're pure physical chaos, we don't really get any benefits from any damage auras. We can't deal elemental damage with Starforge, so Hatred does nothing. Herald of Ash does nothing. The only aura we could benefit from is Haste, which is like whatever. But the rest of the tree is just more or less all the damage. You get Resolute Techniques, you don't have to worry about accuracy. Pick up a bunch of life nodes. Some Templar AoEs, some more life. Like, I picked up these nodes for the Chaos Res, so I can be Chaos Res capped with the Flask. Which is, I mean, just personal preference, you don't need that, but ton of attack speed, ton of life. As for jewels, most of your jewels in the tree are going to be rare jewels, not abyss jewels, because like the amount of life that 7% gives me is way more than this amount of flat life, and then these also give you way more attack speed, way more damage. If we were an elemental build, I would say stack these, but because we can't deal any elemental damage, the amount of flat fizz you get from a Stygian jewel is not nearly as much as you would get from a percent damage jewel. But yeah, all of my jewels are life triple damage, mostly attack speed. I try to get attack speed on every single jewel. This is life, attack speed, damage. life, attack speed, damage. You'll see a theme. They're all like that. And I have a lot of jewels because I'm level 98. But once you get to end game, you'll start picking them up as you go. And as you get better and better jewels, you'll start to feel like the build gets a lot smoother. It gets a lot stronger. You just like scale up really well. So this is the 3.1 skill, or 3.0 skill tree. Let me turn it into the 3.1. One sec. So we need to get rid of some of our life nodes, which kind of is annoying, but not a big deal. You just need 7 points so that you can get into the Wall Pact and Leech nodes. So if you want to do the 3.1 version with way more Leech, you pick up Wall Pact, which doubles your life leech per second, and you pick up Vitality Void for the maximum amount of Leech you can get. So the way Leech works is default, it's capped at 20% of your maximum life per second. So normally you'd be able to Leech, on this character's case, what, around 2,000 life a second? But because I have all the Leech nodes, I have plus 3% maximum life leech there, 3% there, 3% there, that puts me at 29%, and then Volpack doubles it, puts you up to 58% of your maximum life leech per second, which is huge. That is a ridiculous amount of regen, like, or leech, sorry, not regen, you lose your regen. And so this just makes you like a lot safer overall. I lose some life doing it, but I gain a ton of survivability while actually like face tanking things, which is pretty cool. So I guess now we'll go over all the gear and links and whatnot. People always ask me about Pantheons. These aren't super important, but I just have physical damage reduction and less AoE damage taken. You can actually get all three of the capture things with the Divine Vessels. You could, I thought it was just one at first, but you can actually pick up all three. So I take no extra damage from crits if you've taken a crit recently, so I can't get like spike critted down to 0. If I take a little crit, I'm immune to crits for the next 4 seconds basically, which is really nice. And then this one, it just gives you Physma damage while standing still, which is every time you're lacerating in a boss fight, you can't move as much, so like you get to stack up your Phys mitigation. You can actually see it happening right here. Like it's quite a bit of reduction just by standing still, so the longer you stay in the tank you get. And I don't know, it's pretty cool. Yeah, so that's that. Let's look at the gear itself. So main weapon, you want a Starforge. This is your best in slot weapon. Beyond this, you could go for like an extremely high DPS mirrored two-handed sword, but this is like 700 and something DPS, and it costs a couple X versus mirroring a, I don't know, a mirror plus 100x fee for something like Mindfang, which is like 800 and something DPS. It would give you more DPS, sure, but you lose the life on it. Like this gives us 400 life because it has almost 100 max life on it, which is really cool. Other uniques, Devoto's is best in slot helmet. You want Lacerate damage or Lacerate AoE. I prefer damage since the AoE is very much not noticeable at this point. Since they tuned everything down from 2.6, just go for damage. And then last unique, you can pick up a Void Heart, but I only recommend Void Heart if you're using a Legacy one, which has the 100% chance to bleed and poison on hit. If you don't have a Legacy Void Heart, you don't play standard, whatever, just use a secondary Steel Ring with Life, Flat Fizz, and Stats Resist, just like this one. As for your amulet, you can use a Carnage Heart while leveling. It provides a lot of stats, a lot of leech damage, a lot of like resistances, stuff like that. But once you get to endgame and you can afford a better amulet, you're going to want as much fizz damage, as much life, as much stats as you can get on it. If you need resists, if you need intelligence, pick it up on your amulet as well. Other ring is just a steel ring with life, flat fizz. A lot of people ask me why I have weapon elemental damage on my items for this particular character. It does nothing, but these are just items in my mirror thread, and there's no real prefixes that I would like at this point, so I just stick with the items I have. Gloves, I go for Legacy Insanity gloves with as much like resist, life, leech doesn't get on them. Again, these have mana leech because they're for other characters, not just this one. But the Insanity lets your leap slam be that much faster, so it helps your movement speed a lot. Since leap slam is our move skill, it's really, really helpful. And then boots, you want two-tone boots with as much resist as possible. If you can afford to not have the resistances, you could go for an enchanted pair of regular boots. But like attack and cascade if you killed recently is good. Life regen if you've hit recently is good for defensive purposes. But we don't really benefit too much from that stuff for boss fights, so I just went for the overall resistances. And then a belt, you actually, at this point, like Stygian belts exist, so you're probably going to want to get something like this with as much life and resist as possible on it. This is in my mirror thread, of course, and that'll allow you to have an extra jewel socket, so you can get a little bit more life out of your belt. As for the jewel in your belt, You're going to want life, you're going to want flat fizz with sword attacks, you're going to want flat fizz to attacks, and you're going to want attack speed. Would be like a perfect Abyss Jewel for us. You can only get that on a Murderous Eye Jewel, which is like the melee attack ones. I don't have one of those yet, so I'm still using my other belt, and this belt has Chaos Res and this one doesn't, so I want to be Chaos Res capped. Which I'm not, because my skill tree is a little bit messed up right now because I just changed it, but you know. You juggle your gear, you make it work. Flasks. Some of these give damage. These 3 give us damage, and these 2 give us defense. Because you're immune to bleed and you're immune to stuns from your Slayer Ascendancy, you don't need a bleed flask. So I just have a remove fleas basalt flask for fizz mitigation, and then I have a taste of hate for fizz mitigation and some chance to avoid freeze as well. The extra cold damage does nothing because again, Starforge, no LE damage. Sin's Rebirth gives us Unholy Might and immunity to ignite, and it bleeds enemies, so they sometimes just miss. But Unholy Might is a buff that gives you 30% of your physical damage added as chaos for the flash duration, so we get a ton of extra chaos there. And then with the Aziri's Promise, it's the same thing. Fizz is chaos. You just get extra chaos damage constantly, and then Lion's Roar serves a couple purposes. Number one, it knocks things back, so they don't actually get to melee you. You push them away from you. And then it also gives you a bunch of more melee physical damage, which is just another more multiplier. And it stacks with all of your things. So as you can see right now, I don't have any chaos damage really, but if I use all of my flasks, then I get a ton of chaos damage. So we deal a huge amount of chaos as well as physical damage. Most important flask I would say is probably Lion's Roar, and then Aziri's, and then Sin's, and then Taste. If you don't have a Taste, just use a Consecrated Ground Flask, Sulfur Flask for 40% damage and some life regen. But Shaper upgraded items. I'm looking at the Shaper mods for amulets. There's some really nice mods for amulets that we can use. You can get percentage of non-physical damage added as chaos damage, or sorry, percentage of non-chaos added as chaos, which is really good as a prefix. You can also get flat fizz, you can get life. Suffix wise, you can get attack speed as a Shaper affix as well. So I'm going to try to craft an amulet for this character. I've already dumped like 500x into trying to replace this, so that eventually all of my gear will be mirror tier, but currently it's just my amulet that's lacking. Other options for uniques, you can also equip Belly of the Beast, but depending on how good your gear is in general, I have a rare chest with a bunch of life, resist, and stats on it. This is the best life chest in the game as far as I'm aware, but if I equip a belly, it gives me a little bit extra life in exchange for losing a lot of resist. So I actually prefer to use my rare chest. It also gives me more damage on a rare chest. The 58 strength gives you, what is that, like 12% melee damage versus none on this. So like even with a perfect, this is a 100% perfect belly, it's still not as much life or as much damage as I would get if I just stayed with my rare chest right here. So links, we'll go over that real quick. Lacerate is your main skill. It's in order of priority. It's melee physical damage, multi-strike, faster attacks. That's like your 4 link. And then for 5th link, use maim. 6th link, use damage on full life. The multi-strike faster attacks makes it so that it feels good. You don't get stuck in the multi-strike animation nearly as much, which is really important. It's not the best pure damage. If you want pure damage, you can take out faster attacks and put in Conk Effect, but then you lose a ton of your AoE and it feels a little bit slower. Casting damage taken setup, I have Enfeeble, Lightning Golem, Immortal Call. All the highest levels you can get depending on how much life you have. Because I have like 9,000 life normally, triggering at 3.5k life is about a third of my life. I try to keep my casting damage takens at about a third of my life for softcore. If you're playing hardcore, I would recommend going up higher to like 15% of your max life when you want it to trigger, so you get a lot more use out of it. And then Leap Slam setup, you have your Leap Slam, faster attacks, fortify, and endurance charge on melee stun. This is our generation for endurance charges, which feeds our Immortal Call so that it lasts longer and gives us the longer immunity to fizz damage. And then of course Fortify is just 20% less damage taken from hits, which is a huge layer of defense for us. And then you have your 6-link War Chief setup, which I have linked to War Chief, damage on full life, melee physical damage, bloodlust, faster attacks, and Conk Effect. I think you could potentially swap out faster attacks for Ruthless, but I like this setup because it makes it hit faster. The damage on full life for totems applies to your life, so if I'm at full life, the totem is considered to be getting this bonus all the time, which is pretty good. And this is just a bunch of damage. If you don't have a 6-link chest, you can just use a 4-link War Chief, it doesn't matter. But the more links you have, the more damage your War Chief does. And standing in hideout, it does more damage than I do with Lacerate, so if that gives you any idea of how much it does with full buffs and everything like that, it's pretty high. And then your other 4-link, you got a couple of gems to just play around with. I'm using a Blood Rage, which is the only like required other gem. And then you have a 3-link to play with. I have it linked to Portal and faster casting, so my Portal is like nearly instantaneous. And then also linked to Enhance. Enhance gives quality to supported active skill gems, which would be Blood Rage and Portal. The quality on Blood Rage is attack speed. So this Enhance, it's at 20% right now. If I put a level 4 Enhance in, it goes up to 26% attack speed. And then quality on Portal is also cast speed, so it's like 60% to 132% cast speed, which is massive. So that's what I like to go for. Let me undo my tree back to what it was so I can like get my int back. Actually, no, we can show you guys this. Hang on. Let me just refund a life node real quick so I can get my int back. This is not the correct way to do this, but I don't have enough int otherwise. I need to get better amulet still. Okay, so now we're going to go do a random map to show you guys the tooltip damages, because people always want to know about that sort of things. I want to say my Lacerate. I'm not going to guess. I'm not going to guess. We'll just run a map so we can show you. This is the 3.1 skill tree with Fall Pact and double leech and all that stuff. So as you can see, we degen with Blood Rage, which is kind of annoying. But because we have Fall Pact, we can do this. Just let him hit you. I know, I think the Fall Pact version's a lot better for mapping in general, but when it comes to doing things like lab, I would prefer not to have that. But your damage is exactly the same, so let's go ahead and get a full tooltip here. 319k and 333k on War Chief. But yeah, if you're looking for like a leveling guide, all the skill trees and whatnot, the forum guide linked below in the description in this video will have all of those leveling guides. You can also use swords, axes, maces, whatever you want. I'll go ahead and show you guys that real quick. So the skill trees for swapping from swords to axes, say you want to use a disfavor, is actually very simple. You just spec out of these nodes. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points, you just put them right here into these nodes. You'll have to lose 2 points somewhere else, but these are actually more efficient damage-wise per point for axes, but you use a disfavor, which has about 600 DPS versus the 700 something DPS on Starforge. If you wanted to use maces, you can just swap into these. Maces allow you to use things like Earthquake Sunder. Axe allows you to do things like, same thing, Earthquake Sunder. But you can use any two-handed melee skill. You can also, even if you really, really wanted to, you could go staffs. It wouldn't really be that good since these are crit nodes, but you could potentially use a two-handed staff if you found a really, really good one or something like that. But other than that, the skill tree is exactly the same, which is really nice. And of course, because we are using a two-handed sword, we have access to things like Cleave, Lacerate, Cyclone, all sorts of stuff like that. And then you can use Earthquake Sunder with axes and maces. You can use any skill you want, basically. You could even use Heavy Strike. Like, it's totally up to you. But the build's very, very versatile. It works great in every situation. The only thing you can't do is pure Fizz Reflect maps or pure Cannot Leech maps, because obviously we're Slayer. Most of our life leech and defense is from their ability to leech. If you remove that, it's not good. But you can do everything else. You can do every content in the game. And I really love this character, so I hope you guys do as well. If you enjoyed the guide, leave a like, share it with your friends so they can build the same thing. Check out the forum guide if you need a lot more detailed information and like written out step-by-step everything, leveling items, skill trees, everything like that. You can check out the forum guide. But hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. That'll be Demi out. Happy New Year's, by the way.